Have you ever just looked at a world map and wondered, why did things turn out the way they did? Why over the last 500 years was it societies from Eurasia that ended up conquering or displacing people from other continents and not the other way around? It's a huge question, right? It gets to the very heart of the massive inequalities we see today. And in this explainer, we're going to dig into one of the most powerful and controversial answers out there.
And look, this isn't just some abstract puzzle for historians. It's deeply personal. This question was put to the author Jared Diamond by his friend Yali, a politician in New Guinea. And when Yali says cargo, he doesn't just mean stuff, material goods. He's talking about technology, influence, power, the whole shebang. Yali's question is really about destiny, and it's the central mystery we are going to unpack right now.
Okay, so to even start to answer a question that big, we have to throw out all the old, ugly, and totally discredited theories of the past. The answer isn't about any supposed differences between groups of people. No way. Instead, we have to dig way, way deeper to what Diamond calls the ultimate causes, the environmental bedrock that literally shaped the path of human history.
This is a massive shift in thinking. For centuries, people tried to explain global inequality with these awful racist ideas. Diamond's theory just tosses all that in the garbage. It says, forget about that, and look at this radical alternative. The fate of different peoples wasn't determined by the people themselves, but by the raw materials their environment happened to give them. It's not about the players, it's about the playing field.
So our story really kicks off about 13,000 years ago. The last ice age is ending, and humanity is about to make its single biggest leap. We invented agriculture. But here's the crucial part. The chance to start farming wasn't handed out equally. It was basically a geographical lottery. And as it turns out, some continents were holding all the winning tickets.
So what were these winning tickets? What was in the jackpot? Well, it all came down to the local plants and animals. To go from being a wandering hunter-gatherer to a settled farmer, you need two very specific things. First, you need plants that are easy to grow and packed with calories. And second, you need large animals that you can actually tame for their meat, their milk, and their muscle power. But these crucial ingredients were spread out very, very unevenly across the globe.
And when I say unevenly, I mean the difference is absolutely staggering. Just think about this. Of the 14 major species of large domesticable mammals in the entire world, the big ones like cows, pigs, sheep, and horses, an incredible 13 of them were native to Eurasia. The Americas, they had just one, the llama. And sub-Saharan Africa, despite all its amazing wildlife like zebras and wildebeest, had zero. None of them could be reliably domesticated. This one fact of biology gave Eurasian societies an almost unbelievable head start.
And it didn't stop there. The advantage just kept compounding. It wasn't just the animals. Eurasia also hit the jackpot with the best grains, things like wheat, barley, and rice, which are super productive and high in protein. Now, the Americas had amazing crops like corn and potatoes, for sure. But the total agricultural package in Eurasia, the high-protein grains, plus an entire team of animal helpers, it created a food-producing engine that was just in a completely different league, right from the very beginning.
Then there was one more giant geographic advantage: the literal shape of the continents. Eurasia is long. It stretches east to west. This means you have this huge corridor with similar climates and day lengths. So a crop domesticated in the Middle East, like wheat, could spread all the way to Europe and India with no problem. But the Americas and Africa, they're oriented north-south. So to spread, you have to cross totally different climate zones, from tropics to deserts. It was a massive barrier. Eurasia was like an innovation superhighway. The other continents were more like a series of dead-end streets.
So you have this huge head start in farming. How does that one advantage lead to such a massive power imbalance thousands of years later? Well, it wasn't just a one-time bonus. It was the first domino in a long chain reaction, a great cascade of consequences that would shape the rest of human history.
And it unfolds like this. Step 1. That super efficient Eurasian farming creates a food surplus, more food than you need just to stay alive. Step 2. That surplus allows for bigger, denser populations to stop wandering and settle down in villages and then cities. Step 3. Once you have a dense population, not everyone has to be a farmer anymore. This frees people up to become specialists: soldiers, priests, metalworkers, inventors, bureaucrats. And finally, step 4, it's these large, specialized societies that innovate faster, build complex governments, and develop new technologies.
All of that deep history, the farming, the food surpluses, the specialists, is what eventually leads to the direct tools that allowed Europeans to conquer so much of the world. And this finally brings us to the famous title of the book, Guns, Germs, and Steel. These things weren't just random accidents of genius, they were the predictable results of that thousands of years-long geographic head start.
Take guns, for example. You don't just wake up one day and invent a gun. It's the end result of centuries of progress in metallurgy and chemistry. And that kind of long-term innovation only happens in large, competitive states that have the food surplus to support skilled artisans and the political motivation, which was basically constant warfare, to pour resources into making deadlier and deadlier weapons.
Now for what might be the most devastating factor of all, the germs. The deadliest weapon of conquest was totally invisible and completely unintentional. Because Eurasians had lived in close quarters with all their domesticated animals for thousands of years, they were constantly exposed to their germs. This led to horrific diseases like smallpox and measles, but over time, it also built up their immunities. When they traveled to the Americas, where people had never been exposed to these animal diseases, the germs became invisible bioweapons, wiping out as much as 95% of some native populations. It was catastrophic.
And finally, steel. It was the literal backbone of conquest. Steel gave you stronger swords and armor. It gave you better plows to grow even more food. And it gave you the ships that could cross oceans and build global empires. And just like guns, steel could only be mass-produced by societies that had already gone through that entire great cascade, from surplus food all the way to specialized labor.
Okay, so this is the absolute key to understanding the whole argument. Guns, germs, and steel were the proximate causes of conquest. That just means they were the immediate tools, the things that explain how it all happened. But they don't explain why. The ultimate or root cause was geography, that lopsided distribution of useful plants and animals, and the shape of the continents themselves. That's what gave Eurasia that massive head start in the first place.
So let's circle all the way back to Yali's profound question about cargo. The answer this theory gives us is that the deep inequalities of our world aren't a story about differences between people, it's a story about the long, powerful shadow cast by the land they happen to live on. A lucky roll of the geographical dice gave Eurasian societies an agricultural head start, which set off a domino effect leading to denser populations, more complex societies, and advanced technology, which ultimately produced the tools of conquest: guns, germs, and steel.
This theory is a really powerful way to look at our past. But it also makes you think about the future, right? If geography and environment were so decisive for thousands of years, what about now? In a world facing climate change, new trade routes opening in the Arctic, and huge competition for resources, it kind of seems like geography's role in shaping our destiny is far from over.